We may be one step closer to seeing Donald Trump's tax returns. NBC News can confirm the breaking report from the New York Times just a couple hours ago that state prosecutors are aggressively seeking Donald Trump's tax returns and that they have issued subpoenas to the president's accounting firm to get them. From that Times report, quote, the subpoena opens a new front in a wide-ranging effort to obtain copies of the president's tax returns, which Mr. Trump initially said he'd make public during the 2016 campaign, but has since refused to disclose. The subpoena was issued by the Manhattan DA's office late last month, soon after it opened a criminal investigation into the role that the president and his family business played in hush money payments made in the run-up to the election. It's this case that resulted in Donald Trump being named Individual One and essentially an unindicted co-conspirator in that illegal hush money scheme. Michael Cohen's sentencing memo in that case is crystal clear, saying this, quote, Cohen himself has admitted with respect to both payments he acted in coordination with and at the direction of Individual One. Joining our conversation, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General and host of the Talking Feds podcast, Harry Litman. Harry Litman, I have always thought, and I have always been told by Trump insiders, that it is this criminal campaign finance investigation that was first run out of the Southern District of New York that is now being pursued by state prosecutors that has always represented the most legal peril to Individual One, a.k.a. Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think we've heard that part because of the aggressiveness of the SDNY. But even now, under the Manhattan DA, they can do a lot of damage, and they've laid the groundwork for a lot of evidence. And now Cohen appears to be cooperating with them as well. So this really does open a new front in the whole war about getting his tax records. Notice they would still be secret if the DA got them. But as opposed to the federal campaign where they're trying to get them from the Secretary of Treasury, who's resisting for no good reason, here it's just going to be straight New York State, the same records, and a private accounting firm that has said they'll cooperate. This really does, as you say, make it a giant step closer to somebody's having their hands on them.
And it would seem that all of the pushback against Michael Cohen around his credibility from the president's allies, all those tools in Donald Trump's arsenal fade away when it's an investigation that isn't playing out in the circus environment of Congress.
That's true. That won't stop him from telling people on his Twitter feed it's about something else and it's a harassment and everything else. And, you know, they'll do what they can to convince a private firm to, you know, to not comply. And it'll be interesting to see if they do. Again, it's true that they will be protected in the grand jury, and it's not likely that we'll see them. But it is. It's always been clear that his tax returns are the holy grail and that he will do anything to keep them from coming out. And for House Democrats, it's been a real frustration because they believe under the statute that they legally have the right to get them because they would legislate, should they learn of any conflicts that make him beholden to the Russians or anything else, emoluments violations, that they could then legislate for future presidents, what requirements of transparency would prevent such conflicts for future office holders. But they're convinced all along that they are not likely to get them before the 2020 election. And, we'll see what happens with this case. But the president has always valued keeping these a secret above most things.
You know, I remember when the president said to a group of New York Times reporters that if Robert Mueller went for any of his business information, that would be a red line. I mean, to A.B.'s point, this has always been among the most protected of Trump secrets.
Yes, and so far they've been successful in delaying. So the difference, what's interesting about this, two things. One is this a reminder that there's investigation. There's still legal threats to the president that are well outside of Congress, which has kind of become a bit of they just don't seem to have their act together in terms of investigating the president. But, if they were to get his tax returns, which it looks like the president's lawyers are going to be successful in delaying that, and it's not going to happen for the 2020, that would obviously be a really big deal. They're probably not going to do that. And at the same time, this investigation isn't going to reveal them either, because unless they introduce them in some sort of trial. So they're still, if you're Trump, you're still winning in that sense, because you're not having to. The likelihood of his tax returns being disclosed just seems increasingly low. And at the same time, we don't know what he meant by that red line, because he's, people are crossing it. They're going after his tax returns.
The case where he was named an unindicted co-conspirator, named individual one, the case that Michael Cohen is in jail for, in part, the campaign finance violations. This seemed to me, if there was an appetite in Congress for what they seem to be doing now, on even days, on odd days, they call it something else. But this would seem the most directly related to his election. I remember the headlines in your paper and in the New York Times after the Cohen sentencing. Basically, Donald Trump defrauded the voters, that by participating in an illegal campaign finance scheme, that was directly related to telling voters a lie about his personal sexual relationships before his election. Why isn't this issue front and center? Why is it one among 6 for the House Judiciary Committee?
It is front and center for many members of the House Judiciary Committee. When I sit down and talk privately with House Democrats, they're frustrated in a sense because they believe the House Intelligence Committee on the Russia investigation was moving forward at a rapid pace. Then the Mueller report ended up, in the eyes of many people, defining the issue rather than the House committee in its own investigation. The House committee now on these issues is doing its own probe. But again, it's the Manhattan DAs. It's other investigators who are taking the lead. So they're sitting there on Capitol Hill, these elected lawmakers, saying they're trying to pursue these investigations, but they're waiting for these people in New York to finish the investigation. They want to move forward now. That's why Speaker Pelosi keeps telling them, privately and publicly, build a wholesale case against President Trump, from Doonbeg and his properties all around the world, the way the administration uses those properties from time to time, to his personal finances. Build a whole case that also involves the Russia activity, and then make the case to the American people. But it's tough for a lot of these lawmakers because they're not sitting there.
Is that the right strategy? I mean, Mueller built a whole case. It was in a book this big. Nobody read it.
They're looking for a smoking gun, but they also have some hesitation. Is this the emphasis for 2020 or not? Should impeachment be the rally cry, or should they run on health care and the economy? And that there's a real tension within the Democratic Party. They all want to see President Trump removed from office. Some want to do it tomorrow through articles of impeachment. Others say he's beatable in 2020. Don't just focus on impeachment. That makes him a victim. That makes him have a grievance issue. Don't give him that.
It's never boring.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.